Sounds good to hear. All right. I'm going to actually pop into the share right now.
Okay, so let me just make a quick announcement.
Yep.
So welcome to another meetup, DC Flutter meetup. We have today with us Jean-Etienne LaVallee.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, okay, I tried. So yeah, he will be covering a topic that I've been looking forward to for a while, actually. So it is AWS Amplify. It's a backend that supports other applications along with Flutter. And I think they went GA in February.
Yep.
And I think of it as a somewhat viable alternative to Firebase in some cases, especially if you're invested in AWS. It's a good alternative, good option for people who have invested. But anyway, I was very excited when I heard Etienne he was going to present on the Amplify platform. So Etienne, please go ahead and just give us your just maybe a 30-second background of yourself.
Oh, sure. I've got the share going. Sorry, I just hit that.
Sure, no, that's fine.
Actually, you know what? That leads right into my first slide on this. So let me just lead in on that. So who am I? So Jean-Etienne LaVallee. I go by just Etienne. Some folks know me as Red, and more often I'm referred to as that guy. There's my footprint online in the interwebs. A little bit about me. I'm dad to these two awesome kids, married to this equally awesome wife. As you can see behind me, I'm something of a passionate maker and 3D printing aficionado. And I'm also a lead engineer at Capital One. This is one of my old development teams having another day at the pod. Tend to have a good time. Got, some of my hobbies. I love flat water kayaking and nature photography. I teach STEM to elementary and middle schoolers. Use some kids playing with Arduino bots. It's quite fun. I'm also a volunteer for the First Robotics program. And my attitude is to just have fun with things. So I'm just going to kick off from here, if that's okay, Barra.
Yeah, just kick it off.
All yours. So, like me, I think about a year ago, a lot of us found that we had suddenly a lot of time on our hands. Sort of the elephant in our Zoom right now is the fact that we're doing this virtually tonight. And once we had some time on our hands, we were like, well, it's time to visit old hobbies. And, if you're like me, you may have gone and dug out that Rock Band or Guitar Hero kit you got squirreled away in the attic. And you might have decided to take up, something new and develop some new skills, like this Flutter thing that your mobile friends and web friends have all been twittering about. And, you got into that, and, after a few weeks, you're kind of feeling good. And you feel like a rock star on one side. You could be like this guy. You could jam out like this dude, or you could be like as cool as, well, no, not you can't be as cool as Prince. I'm sorry, but over on your Flutter learning sides, you're kind of like, yeah, this is great. I'm gonna party and write code all night with my hipster friends, and I'm gonna need extra keyboards. And you're like this dude, sweating to techno and programming at his sitting desk while standing up. Anyway, but what your friends really saw was more along the lines of this kid or her with her blow up guitar, or him just playing air guitar on his t-shirt. That's basically you with your rock band. And as you're digging into Flutter, you're starting to realize, oh, there's a bigger landscape here, and you're kind of feeling like a noob. You start trying to connect it to APIs and have something like a robust backend for it. And you find yourself staying up late drinking Black Label Monster, and you wind up like this guy, drinking and crying at his sit-down computer desk, wondering where did I go wrong. And but what you need to do is you need to amp up your skills, kind of like this dude. Yes. Let's have that again. Do that one more time. Yeah, this needs audio actually. I should add audio to this. So how are we going to do that? We're going to use Amplify today. That's what I'm going to be kind of going over, how this one can help you turn your skills up to 11, like our friend Nigel here. So stepping back, like Amplify is a toolkit provided by AWS. It, in and of itself, is a combination of a command line tool and a series of SDKs. And the command line tool is really responsible for orchestrating some fairly robust managed services in the AWS cloud. That includes AWS AppSync, which provides GraphQL resolver API interfaces, API Gateway, which is similar but for RESTful interfaces and scaffolding those. AWS Lambda, which is the general compute glue of the AWS landscape. It allows you to write very small microservices that are really just functions in these days almost any language. You've got Node.js, Python, Java, the list goes on. Additionally, DynamoDB is the first class data store for Amplify, but not limited to that. We'll get into that. DynamoDB is a NoSQL large record set with robust replication across AWS zones. AWS Cognito for kind of being your bouncer, providing your authentication services with user pools and identity management. And then some magic that's sprinkled in there in the framework that's specifically generators and scaffolding tools that take a lot of the guesswork and a lot of the heavy duty wiring work that goes into building an AWS topology and automates that for you. So taking a bird's eye view of this stage and how this is all laid out, if we look at this, your audience is your customer, of course, interacting with your app experience enabled with the Amplify SDK. Over on stage left over here, we have file services and cloud storage services provided through the S3 framework, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with already. And that's also backed by Glacier, allowing you to like offload stale data if you're, say, making an application with a lot of photography in it. A lot of those photos get stale over time, can be offloaded or synchronized out. In the application tier here, which is really where a lot of the heavy lifting for Amplify happens, there's several compute and identity services here that are really valuable for front-end developers. API Gateway provides a fast up and deployable REST interface. What we'll be looking into today, and I'm going to be demoing, is the AppSync Gateway model, which is a GraphQL API interface. And then Cognito, as I mentioned before, providing auth services and user pool management. Backing the data providers here, you can see their Lambda resolvers that really act as the business logic mappers to backend data stores. Out of the box, Amplify scaffolds to DynamoDB when you're creating an API service. But these resolvers give you the ability to very easily remap that or even create pipelines to collect the data from various other data sources. So if you're already deployed in RDS with an existing application, you can still consume from that without having to do a massive rebuild of your entire framework. Additionally, we have all of this topology is generating CloudWatch data, which can be both used, profiled, and aggregated. And right now, there's some support for push notifications using SNS and event triggers, but it's really limited to email and SMS pushes just because of lack of available app level integration for classic native push in there. And then rounding out the stage, we've got the Amplify plugin framework, which Amplify itself is built in a plugin model. So this allows for extensibility, so that either if you wanted to add a new feature to the CLI and the SDK, you could do that. Or if you have an existing feature that you want to customize for a particular need, you could create an extended plugin for doing that as well. Now for today, we're going to be looking at, oh, here we go. I do have dogs in the background, I apologize. For today, we're going to be looking at this, this critical path here. We're actually going to stand up this critical path here, creating a GraphQL interface. And I'm going to normalize that a bit. So we'll be putting together pretty much straight through shot, demonstrating all of the CRUD functionality for being able to query a data record set out of DynamoDB through GraphQL. And also, like with anything, like what's going on the front stage is fun, but like the party's in the backstage. And that's really where we bring in the Amplify tooling that provides the DevOps infrastructure here. You consider like the Flutter developer being like the AV engineer at a concert, from their development environment, just using their source control and using the Amplify CLI, they can actually orchestrate both the user experience and the backend from one place, and with fairly easy tools that do a lot of the heavy lifting here in the CloudFormation tier. And likewise, switching, if you're going into a headless mode for, say, your higher region automation, the CI/CD model then would just have Amplify being the service command interface for your CI/CD tool chain. So say QA regions, beta regions, pre-production, production could be automated using the exact same tooling that you would use to do your DevOps from the command line during development cycles. So with that, we can hop into our demo of this, and hopefully we won't have to burn a guitar in the process, but we'll see how it goes. For our set list today, we're going to be taking a fairly boring, basic to-do Flutter app that is not connected to the back end. We're going to amp that up a bit, and we're going to wire in AppSync using GraphQL resolvers and a basic DynamoDB to back it, just to give you an example of how quickly you can get up and running with this. So I'm going to hop over to my IDE. And so I will be providing this at the end of the presentation. I actually have a GitHub repo set up with all of the basic steps I'll be going through today, including instructions on how to set up your command line environment. Out of the box, it's expected that, you have Flutter working, of course. We are building a Flutter app. And the other part of it is to have the Amplify CLI, which again, there's instructions for that, set up, but also have it set up with a AWS user account, which I've already taken care of here, just because seriously, you don't want to watch me do that work for 25 minutes. So what we're going to do is I've already pulled down the first step from this repo, which is our basic boring to-do app. So let's give that a run real quick here. There we go. And there we have it. And so this is, your run of the mill. If we take a look at the code here, actually, I'll walk through. Take a look at it. So we've got our basic CRUD operations. Create a new boring to-do item. And there it is. And we've got the ability to change status on these, and we've got the ability to delete. But this is all really just your classic boilerplate tutorial-esque Flutter app with a state, state provider on a stateful widget, and we're just wiring that in. This will give us nice entry points here to where we can actually wire in our Amplify implementation in a bit. And for now, we're going to quit out of that. and we're going to actually do our first step. So in order to get this up and running and AWS to recognize it, we need to initialize our project to work with Amplify. So I'm going to first check out this code update. There. And then we can run the command amplify init. And this will walk us through the process of creating basically a shell Amplify project for our Flutter project and pushing that shell out into AWS Cloud. Give it a second here. This is the test we didn't do with whether this is video performance is going to impact this. There we go. All right, so we'll take the defaults on most of this. It's recognized I'm using Visual Studio. It's going to be using my default dev environment, and we'll use lib as our storage. So yeah, that's all great. And we're going to use some access keys. Bear with me as I get these added in. This is just so that we're doing this as securely as possible. There we go. And we're going to deploy that to East. And now the magic starts. So this right here, if we open this up, what you can see here is this is actually executing CloudFormation commands to the cloud, and is building a the authentication, deployment artifacts, deployment targets, etc. needed for building our Amplify project structure out there. Once that's deployed, we can actually have a look over here. We're almost there. There are several artifacts that are going to be generated as part of this, which I can show you there. While we're waiting, so I'm going to take a look at here is our to-do app uses this very plain old Dart object to-do model, which will be useful for taking a look at in a bit. And there go the dogs, my apologies. Right, and there we go. We've got our scaffolding up, and this created an Amplify deployment repo in our project. In particular, this backend, which is fairly skeletal right now, this will be populated with more configuration and artifacts as we work through. And then there's this Amplify Dart configuration, which right now, again, very, very lightweight because we just gotten the initial project set up. But now we are ready to be able to add features to our Amplify configuration. So we are going to do that with our next step here. And if we run the Amplify, well, actually, let's take a look at Amplify status first. Amplify status will let you know what our current project settings are and what state both our local and remote environment are in. It's going to be pretty bland. There we go. Yes, we're on our dev environment and nothing's deployed. So we know we've got a good clean baseline. So now we're going to use the Amplify, I don't know if I can spell it, add API command, and this will add an API component for us. There we go. And we're going to choose to use a GraphQL endpoint. We'll just again take the generic name. For now, we use API key. That's fine. Amped up demo key. Sure. And yeah, we're going to end up destroying this environment pretty quickly anyway. And we will then be going, nah, we don't need special auth types. No. Collision, no. I don't have my own GraphQL schema, but I am going to use one of the default ones that just happens to be a to-do item. Almost like I planned that. So now we are going to say no to this. And let's take a look at that. We now see that in the back end here under the Amplify build repo, we've had an API folder created, and within that have the scaffolding for deployable pieces there. And we have this new schema file. Now, if you've worked with GraphQL, the schema defines the contract for your GraphQL interface. And in this case, it generated a generic to-do model for us here as part of the demo. If we look, though, our to-do model in our code has this completed flag, and that's missing over here. So before we do anything next, before we actually do the full build out of this, I'm actually going to just add that in here. Now, this is a good way of demonstrating that this schema file acts as the source of truth for your model design with GraphQL or with Amplify as well. And what we're going to do here is we're going to run the Amplify. Let me save that. Push command here. And Amplify push is now going to take and build the auto-generated artifacts here, and then going to do a similar CloudFormation orchestration to push this out into the AWS topology. I'm probably going to have a little Q&A here because I'm not telling it just to run straight through. Yep, that's the one we're going to create. Okay, cool. So while this is running, I'll walk through some of the things it's doing here. Here it says, it's compiled the GraphQL schema, which it has now done. And if we look in our build output here, you can see there's this other schema file. And now taking a look at this, you can see here that this is not just our to-do item, but Amplify has gone and generated all of the interstitial types and input structures needed for realizing these query interfaces. So here we have the get entity and the list entities. And then a little further down here, we have our mutation methods, which are basically the rest of your CRUD. And so this work would normally be a developer's responsibility, or you'd have to have some other model GraphQL generation framework. Amplify is doing this for you. And if I were to take and modify the base template here to say add other types, add relationships between types, Amplify would equally expand that into this generated schema model, and also allow you to do things like add sorters, add filters, add other GraphQL queryisms into this, and is responsive to that as you're using it interactively. Let's take a look at our, we're almost deployed. So let's take a look here and see everything that's going on here. Now you can see there's a lot more activity because we're actually creating, several layers of structures here, but we should have that out there. One other thing interesting to look at here is also the resolvers. The resolvers are those little Lambda compute units that sit between the gateway interface and the backend data store. If we take a look at one of these for, like, say, get to do. This represents the request side of get to do, and this is a velocity template. It's a fairly well documented resolver pattern and SDL that AWS has. And what this is doing is basically saying use the DynamoDB get item operation, mapping in the inbound request object to the outbound DynamoDB request. Very easily, you could go and replace this with a SQL query, and having a similar mapping so that you could execute that SQL query against a MySQL database deployed into RDS, for example. So that gives you at least an insight into that. Amplify generates all this, but you have the freedom and the ability to extend that. So, okay, our deployment's done here. And now we've got an actual functional GraphQL backend interface deployed in AWS. This is showing us where our endpoint is if we want to connect to it directly, and gives us the API key for communicating with that. I'm going to give Amplify status another check so we can see what our environment is reporting back. And then we're going to go take and explore this a little bit. All right, there we go. And so our API is deployed, no changes necessary, so it's not seeing any reason to update it. And it even gave us our endpoint conveniently if we needed it again. But what we're going to do is we're going to go wander around here and look at this on the AWS console. And so I'm going to just do that. Another convenience function here with Amplify is the ability to actually open the console. So we'll just do that here and hop into our browser. It's always the trick. It's going to be Chrome that's the hang up. Ah, there we go. And bring that over here. All right, so this is the Amplify front end for our project. You can actually see all of these operations that we've been watching propagate on the command line are documented here. And it also shows that we have an API endpoint deployed. We can go in there and take a look at that. I'm going to actually zoom this up for you. There we go. And our GraphQL API is here. It's our identity. We can hop over to the AppSync console from here. And this shows us our actual GraphQL deployment that we have. And let me start off with our schema since we've already looked at that before. If you look here under the schema tab, you can actually see the schema we were looking at over in the ID earlier for our to-do object and all of the derived sub-entities and query artifacts. And if we look here at our data sources, you can see the deployed DynamoDB table that was created. And we can hop over there and take a look at that too. And right now, not very exciting, but the wiring is there. So this gives us the opportunity to create some new objects in here. So one of the really fun little tools that AWS includes is a full query interface here so that we can actually talk to our GraphQL endpoint already while it's deployed. And so let's create some new to-do items on there. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the create to-do mutation request that was generated by Amplify. You can see it here, and actually the little editor here, query editor, has identified it already. And we'll just create a new one here. First, up to-do item. Yeah, we'll throw some exclamation points out there. Or amped up. There we go. Okay, so with that, we've got a new record pushed. If we look over here at DynamoDB and refresh, we can see our new item. I'm going to run a couple of those off. So we got a few to play with here. Boom. Bam. And bing, bam, boom. Oh, not fourth. There we go. And if we have a look, we can see those in DynamoDB here. And, we don't even need to do that. We can actually just use our little simple query to do listing. So I'll list our to-dos, and we're just going to get back these fields just to verify them. And yep, there we go. Similarly, if we want to say, let's say we want to change the status of one of these. Let's go here and we'll just do a mutation, which will be an update, much like our create, but in this case, we're identifying one and we're going to say we want to change its state to true. When we do that here, we can see that there. Hop over to DynamoDB. There, it's been changed as well. So we know everything's wired up and working great. And one last thing to try is let's make sure we can delete something. So see you two. And there we go. Okay, so this gives us our whole vocabulary for talking to GraphQL for our demo. Let's hop back to our code and we'll start wiring this in. So back over here, knock that down a little. And let's see here. First thing I want to make sure, pretty sure it's in this piece already. There's one important piece here. Is for our Amplify Flutter project to work, we do need to make sure. Yes, okay. So the Amplify Flutter package needs to be in here. And for our demo, we need the Amplify API, which provides the plugin for the API interface. This provides the SDK interfaces for Flutter so that our app can take advantage of all the bells and whistles. And if we go over here to main and scroll up a bit, part of the state initializer now is to initialize Amplify for the application context. And so in here, we're bringing in that Amplify API, and we're wiring that into the SDK, and then we're running the config on the SDK with that Amplify configuration file, which now is not quite so plain Jane. It's now added the API config details that will get consumed by the SDK at runtime. And we can go and do our first step here, which we really want to be able to refresh our to-do list. So let's first start up the app real quick and see this in real time, and pop this over here and wait for that to load. Should be pretty lickety split. It is having to pull in the SDK. Now we're waiting for that. I'll get our next code step queued up here. And once we get this up, it's going to go pretty smooth. Be able to pretty much use the same patterns that we just demonstrated on the GraphQL client directly in our app. All right. Okay, so still our static data on our state provider here, but what we'll do is we will check out this code update, and this brings in our to-do list update. Instead of now providing from the static collection, we are actually using our same query parlance here that we used before, and we're passing that to the Amplify API plugins query interface, marshaled up into this GraphQL request structure. Now, I'll admit that this part of receiving the response data is less than graceful, and I would not recommend this for, say, production quality code. This is really just getting the JSON data back from the response and manually walking it brute force style, shoving it into new to-do objects. There are frameworks out there, a couple of GraphQL packages for Dart. And one that's got pretty good support right now called Artemis. They're a little more robust because they let you point at your GraphQL schema and generate your Dart artifacts, including a query factory and model generators off of that, so that you don't have to have a rudimentary query model like this. For the sake of the demo, I'm using this because it lets you see everything strung together. But if you were using this in a real production capacity, I would recommend looking at a mapper. And it's something I'll talk about in a little bit. It's one of the gaps in the Amplify framework right now, at least for Flutter, is the inability to do code gen on the client side. If you look at Amplify for JavaScript, Amplify for iOS, Amplify for Android, they also provide a code gen interface so that once you've created your cloud artifacts, you can generate domain-specific model artifacts for your application and your platform. That's most likely coming for Amplify for Flutter, but given, as Barrett noted, that this has been in general availability for only about a month and a half, 2 months at this point, there's still a lot of features that they're building out and adding to there. Now, if we do a reload here, oh, that was not the thing I wanted to do. If we do a reload here and give this a refresh, I hosed that. I turned on the tracker. Hold on. We're going to relaunch that. Still going. Well, I'll take care of that. Just detach the debugger. Apologies for that. Let's get that back up and running. We should be able to see as soon as this loads our actual live data from the backend being presented. There we go. And there we have it. Cool. So our live records are coming back. If I do a force refresh on that, you can actually see the output coming back from the resolver here, getting all those pieces. And really now it's just the exercise of going and stringing in our additional features. So we'll go and let's add our create item here. And there we have it. And again, very familiar. This is the same create to do request that we had for mutation before. One thing to call out here that this is doing a parameter mapping so that when creating the request object, you can actually pass in parameterized variables so that the model side object's values are actually being mapped into the query there. And very similar, just calling instead of the query interface, calling the mutate interface on the API. Those are really the two, from a GraphQL standpoint, those are really the two verbs you need to know, query and mutate. And if we do a refresh properly this time, we should be able to now go in and add a new amped up to do item here and add that in. And there we have it. And let's go back here and look at our DynamoDB just to give that a refresh. Yep, there it is. And here you can see this was a automated insertion. It generated a unique ID for that record. And really it's just the same pattern now for our remaining CRUD features, if you will. Quickly wire in the update, and this likewise is, oh, lost it there. This is likewise doing an update mutation where we're passing in a changed complete status. And now our checkboxes should work for us quite nicely. And if we check over there in Dynamo, there we have it. And really just round out the set for our jam session. We will take care of our delete functionality too. And let's see, fourth is out of here. Nobody likes fourth, right, Randall? So that's our full CRUD front to back. We've amped up this otherwise boring to-do app. And I hope it gives you a good taste of at least kind of the speed and the ease of use with this tooling. I'm going to hop back over to our presentation here. I did want to call out some critical analysis on this. So as I mentioned, they just came out of beta and into general availability very recently. And so some of the things that are great is actually the command line tooling is excellent and is maintained very regularly, and really it facilitates the developer experience quite well. Some lack of Flutter code gen really does mean that you have to do a lot of hand wiring or still develop your own, object mapping capabilities into your app if you really want to make it robust and supportable. Really seamless integration with AWS is a huge benefit. Everything that's being deployed here is an actual AWS managed service. It's not a scaled down, simplified version of it. It is full-blown AWS services that can scale from a dozen users to hundreds of thousands of users without necessarily having to move mountains to get to that scalability. That being said, AWS is a very large landscape, and if we look here, I won't bother. But I mean, AWS adds dozens of services every year, and really being capable and being able to scale and build on that does require you still to have strong competency in those underlying services. But that would be the same for, say, Azure or Google Cloud Provider as well. And then one of the great things is the extensible framework. The core model of this is all plugin based, and so it allows the addition of other capabilities in the future and refinement of existing capabilities. Right now, Amplify has a fairly active contribution community and good support in their Discord and their GitHub channels. I will say, and as I've mentioned, this is still very coming out of the beta phase, but at the same time, there's a lot there, and it's really ready for production. I'm working on a project right now to help a startup build a mobile experience off of their existing web experience using Flutter and Amplify. And the tooling really makes it smooth and nice. We've been able to get authentication services with Cognito set up. We're doing a more robust version of this GraphQL demo that I've just given. And all in all, it really is meeting the quality and the level of robustness that you'd expect from AWS. So with that, I'm going to throw these links and QR codes up on here, and more than happy to open the floor for discussion and questions.
Okay, yeah, we got some questions in the chat box.
Oh, cool.
So,
I'm not going to be able to share at the same time.
So Chaba Saba Toth asks, what's in the update to-do list? The underscore update to-do list.
I think that was in the demo, Etienne, when you were.
Oh, I see.
The code, the function update to-do list.
Oh yeah, I can hop back there. Let's go back here. So the update to do is here. So the update to do in this case is the input is just the structure being passed in. In this case, ID is being used as the matching structure, and it's passing in a completed value. This is actually coming from the to-do object that is in the state. When the checkbox gets checked, that flags this handler method, and it basically just inverts the status on the completed flag for that object. And then that value gets mapped in when it gets pushed. Most of this query, what you're seeing here is really identifying the response structure that you want. So you could push in this change, but then have it pass back a number of other fields for the object that was changed, and you get all of those records back.
Okay, so you know someone has been around a long time when they look at a code and it makes them think of Perl. So
They think of what?
Randall says that Perl.
Yeah. Oh, come on, Randall.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he has a smile, so we know he's joking.
He can talk.
He can get away with that.
Yep. You wrote the book, man. Come on.
Yeah, he can get away with that. So, what was
questions? I'm looking through the chat here.
Yeah, what was the insert to do mutation GraphQL's query snippet? Poses for
Cool.
documentation.
Thank you, Geeth. Let me go back there. This was the create. Is that correct? Insert to do.
Yeah.
Yep. So similar to that one that I was just demonstrating with update, this
Right.
is the main snippet here. And if we look over here, just for reinforcement, if we look over here back at our app sync console, you can see that that's basically this to-do structure, or this create query structure here, mutator structure to be precise. I will say, like, it's worth taking, and I've got resources on the GitHub repo for links to all kinds of great information around this. It's worth getting to know GraphQL. It's a really it's a robust system for being able to create a contract around schema rather than around data representation, the way REST does. And especially, I didn't demonstrate it here because this feature just became available back in February. But one of the great features here with GraphQL, beyond just doing synchronous back and forth queries like this, is that you can set up stream subscription interfaces. So say, for example, that I wanted to know I wanted to know when anytime a new record was created in the to-do table, so that I could immediately update my client experience to have that new record. You could create a subscription to the creation method, and GraphQL would return basically whenever a new record was created, would send that event to you so that you could handle it. That's actually a feature Flutter just added to their SDK recently. And so that adds for a much more responsive back and forth experience. I'm gonna mute for a second as my pup is making noise. All right, I'm back. And so yeah, I would say, and this is a great way of investigating, learning about GraphQL. You saw it took maybe 5 minutes to get that API deployed. And it immediately gives you an environment where you can experiment and make changes and deploy again without a lot of overhead to do it.
So this GraphQL that got scaffolded, generated by the platform, right?
Yep.
So does it do the validation for you also?
Well, if you can build validators in. With the one that I created, it was fairly plain Jane. You may have noticed that at one point I dropped in my schema here an exclamation point on that completed. That was basically to say that this is a required field. So if you were to try to run a create without providing a completed status, you'd actually get an error back from GraphQL saying you can't provision without a value on that field.
Nice.
You can add other complex validators too for other types. Again, within the definition model that GraphQL provides. A fun exercise, actually, and you could do this with the code that I've provided here, is to create a resolver that brings back your to-dos in a sorted fashion. So that, say, if you added a due date field on there, you could bring them back with sorted ascending on when they're due. And it's nice because then you can go into actually creating your own GraphQL queries within the definition file, and Amplify will catch on to that and scaffold that into your deployment for you, so that you can have those custom queries wrapped up in there.
Okay, so Randall asked the real question: are there ways to use placeholders in GraphQL rather than interpolation?
Could you give me that one more time? I'm sorry.
Yeah, are there
my
ways
dog is barking at literally the mailman at this
Yeah,
point.
no, that's fine. Are there ways to use placeholders in GraphQL rather than interpolation?
You could just hard code in values if you wanted to do that. I mean, you could also, like the way I was doing it here, this is, I guess we could go one more level down. I mean, if I were.
So that Artemis library that you were talking about, is that
Yes.
That's a solution for that, I would think.
So yeah, I see what you're saying. So this, doing the string interpolation here
Yeah.
like this, yeah.
Yeah.
Artemis library is definitely what you'd want to look at there. What that
Yeah.
does, and that's, I really like the pattern myself. The Artemis engine, you feed it your GraphQL schema file, the fully realized one, and it will go through and create Dart models for your types that are defined in there, and will also create query generator structures for all of the queries and mutations that you have there. And then your interactions with the API are really interacting with that model scaffolding. When you hand a query off to the API, what you get back is a fully realized object map with the proper relationships. So for example, in ours, we had a fairly flat model. It was just to-do items being returned in a collection. But say we had lists of to-do items. You could create a list type, a to-do list type, have it have a collection of to-do types within it, and then you could have multiple to-do lists. And then GraphQL would actually represent that entire hierarchical model structure. And Amplify is smart enough to see it and create all the different query and mutation interfaces for those different combinations for you.
Nice. So Vincent Humans asks, how about showing a cognitive Flutter example?
I don't have one running right now, but if you stay tuned on the GitHub repo, I'm planning on adding a Cognito demo in there and also adding an S3 demo. And I may even wander into the analytics side so that you can send back like user interaction events that get collected in CloudWatch on the back end. But I can definitely do that through there. Athena demo. Thanks, Keith.
Yeah, Keith. Right? You read that, I guess?
Yeah.
All right. Neil asks, Amplify and Firebase, the Supabase have their own.
I knew somebody was going to ask it.
Of course, that's inevitable, right? If not,
Yes.
if no one, I was going to ask you, right?
Yep.
So how do you
Yeah,
choose
you were
on one?
priming me for it earlier.
Yeah.
This is the natural question from this. It's clear that Amplify is targeting that easy to manage, easy to build, easy to deploy pattern that Firebase has made so famous. I would say that right now, Firebase obviously has had a fairly long running head start, about a decade now. And so obviously they have a lot of robust tools. Ironically, push notifications, something I had mentioned earlier, it's a bit of a gap in the current Amplify toolkit. Even on AWS's documentation, their demos of doing in-app push notifications recommends using Firebase's SDK and libraries for that, and then wiring that to AWS SNS output for being able to trigger those notifications. So that really gives you an idea of how much Firebase has at least the app push notification developer market corner there. But I would say that there's a threshold. Ease of use, Firebase really has it. I wouldn't say that Amplify is falling short on that, as you saw with just this demo here. But if you're looking to build a prototype, proof of concept, maybe even a small pilot of an application idea, Firebase is probably still your best option there for quick up and running and supporting. Where the big differentiator comes in between AWS and Firebase is scalability and if you already have an existing cloud presence in AWS. So scalability, Firebase gets too big for its britches at a certain point. If you're seeing huge success and high traffic with your app experience, your web experience, and you may find yourself at a point where you need to migrate to a larger scale, more scalable cloud framework. And at that point, you're looking at naturally with Firebase, probably Google Cloud Provider or AWS or Azure. If you already got an AWS topology and that's really your preferred cloud provider, then Amplify gives you those easy prototyping and rapid agile development tooling with Amplify. And more so, one of the things about it being very new, and at least on the Flutter SDK, I mean, the JavaScript implementation has been out there for a few years now. On the Flutter SDK is that it's growing. It's there. If you go and compare, say, the JavaScript SDK's library documentation to the Flutter SDK's documentation, you'll see a lot of gaps in there. But for everything that they are providing on the JavaScript and the iOS and the Android side, those features will be coming over to Flutter over time, and you'll see parity there. So it's really more the road ahead with Amplify is looking very good.
Okay, so he said I was serious. What language if not Perl?
What's that?
So Randall was asking,
Oh.
I'm serious. What language if not Perl? So what part of the Randall? What are you referring to exactly?
Oh, you're talking about the Dart?
Maybe he's referring to GraphQL, I guess, right?
Or the GraphQL language
Perl,
does
yeah.
have.
It's its own language. It's
It's
own.
all
It's its own.
it's all going back to Algol. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's its own syntax. Right?
Yes,
Yeah. Can you paginate records with GraphQL, DynamoDB?
Yeah, but you know, Randall, I didn't try to put my entire app on a single line of code.
Yeah. So pagination,
Yep.
yeah, that's not really language specific, right? It's just a matter of I'm sure you can paginate, right?
Yep. Yeah, there's the entire concept of result limiting in GraphQL. So you can set default result limits, like 10 records at a request, 25 at a time. That's where the subscription and streaming pattern that I was referencing comes into play. You could create a subscription where you say list to-dos and set a limit on that query to first return only the first 20 objects, because that would fill your screen. And then you could have an infinite scroll provider pattern where it would immediately retrieve or wait on the stream for the next 10 to come when it gives a yield to the stream. And it could just keep up with that as you go. There's several patterns out there that you could do that with.
Yeah. So Neil says, Mark, GraphQL is an architecture based on object graphs rather than resources like REST, and provides type safety and client-defined responses unlike REST.
Yes.
Yep, that's true. Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
And your contract in that case, and unlike say like a Swagger template describing your RESTful interface or your
data
representative interface. The model in this case is really the contract itself. It defines the structure and the model structure that you're dealing with, and the schema also provides all of your means of mutation and query into that interface. It's quite extensible too. What's great is the resolver piece. Like I showed you the resolvers there, they're pretty pedantic. I mean, it's take this and do a DynamoDB query with it. You could have a scenario where maybe you have several different data stores, and what you could do is you could set up a pipeline of resolvers. So say the first need for your to hydrate your data model is to get a primary record out of this one data store. Once you have that, that can be passed to your next resolver in the pipeline that gets additional data from a second data store, third data store, et cetera. And then that the resolver pipeline piles all that together, and that becomes your response. Where the value comes in there is how well you cache those interfaces, so that you can get over time, cache priming speed efficiencies out of that.
Yeah. So we can safely assume that this GraphQL is being used in production in the enterprise, correct?
Oh yeah, GitHub.
Yeah.
Facebook. I mean, there's a number of GraphQL interfaces out there with top tier providers,
right?
And it's really the way, like, I mean, especially with GitHub, it's what allows them to to extend functionality very quickly without being just constrained to their REST model, but providing a very robust graph model as well.
Mhm. So Adam asks, thanks for the presentation. Will the recording be posted? So Michael, I think it's a good time to give a quick plug to dev community.
Yeah, do we still have Johnny? Johnny's not here. So the dev community, they have a YouTube channel where these videos will definitely be posted afterwards. But you can, I can post a link in the chat.
It's
But
devcommunity.org, and if
Yeah.
you go there, there are links to meetup and YouTube and
Yeah, all the social media. Yeah,
other locations.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm going to drop in, here's the GitHub repo for the code to the demo I just did. Be warned, when you get to the repo, there's nothing there but a README. But if you read the instructions, you can go through the same critical path that I just demonstrated here and be able to play with the code and pick it apart as you go.
Right.
There's
Neil
some great
also,
resources there too.
sure. Neil also reminds us that GraphQL is the query language for dgraph, the graph database.
Yep.
So there's a database. Okay, devcommunity.org. So that URL will have past videos, not just for DC Flutter, but for other communities around Kotlin, Android, iOS, and so forth.
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely check those out too. There's some great material that
Yeah.
they've been pulling together in our sister meetups as well.
Right. Absolutely. Any final words, Etienne? This was a great presentation. I
Thank you.
really appreciate it. Well, it was
No,
wonderful.
I'm seeing a lot
I loved
of
your graphics.
positive comments here. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Your graphics were
and
awesome.
like I said,
Everything was awesome.
I've only been using Amplify with Flutter now for probably about 4 months, but I've just been so impressed with both the tooling and the community around it. And I hope this inspires others to give it a shot and see how it goes for you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll see you at the next meetup.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Randall. Take care, all.